Now, over the last 2 decades, Scotland has witnessed dramatic social, economic and constitutional changes. Through that time, Ipsos MORI Scotland has been tracking public opinion. And tonight, at the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, they marked the milestone with a special event, reflecting on 2 decades of change and looking forward to what the future might bring.
There have been some incredible changes. There's the Parliament, all sorts of social and cultural attitudes have changed over that period of time. And of course, we've had massive, huge international events like the independence referendum. So it's partly about that, and it's partly about the future. It's what are the challenges that we face as a country? How will the population change? How will our behaviours change? How will our attitudes change? Will there be another referendum, etc.? So what are the challenges that are ahead, and how have we changed in the last 20 years?
Well, joining us now is the Daily Record journalist Anna Burnside and the Observer and national columnist Kevin McKenna. Thank you both for joining us. Anna, what was your reaction to what you saw there? Did it resonate?
Yes, and it just reminded you how many great things have happened in the last 20 years. You know, given the kind of news that we've been watching recently, actually that was really cheering. You know, thanks Ipsos MORI having this anniversary to remind us that actually we've become a really progressive country with our own parliament, and that we brought in the equal marriage and other great things that weren't even mentioned, like the smoking ban. I thought it was pretty cheery.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not so convinced.
I was having a chat with Anna earlier, and over the last few years, how many times have we all been asked what would we have done without mobile phones? What did we do when we didn't have them? I was thinking 20 years ago, I had my first ever sign-on to the internet, got my first mobile phone a year later, but I think for a lot of my adult life I've done quite well without it. One thing I would say, and I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, but one major social change I've noticed with my contemporaries, people a generation older, is that there was job certainty 20 years ago. People expected that the job they were in, if they'd been trained for it, if they were qualified for it, that they would retire in it. That just is not unheard of now. It's far, far more rare. And that has had an effect culturally. People are looking for other ways to earn money, 2 jobs. And I think that's still to play out. I wouldn't like to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but some people have taken advantage of it.
You both touched on the social side, but of course the big emphasis at the beginning of the piece certainly was the politics, and particularly the Parliament. Has that made a big difference, do you think?
I think it has. I mean, 20 years ago, who would have thought that not only would we have our own Parliament in an Eric Morales building, but that 3 of the political parties would be led by women, and 2 of the political parties would be led by gay people who were out as being gay and perfectly open about it. I mean, really, that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, those are 2 of the biggest things. The third one is that 20 years ago, the concept of Scotland being independent was unheard of. We're on the cusp of it now, whether you're yes or voted yes or no. And also the fact that in 1995, no matter how enlightened and liberal we thought we were in 1995, if you were gay being brought up in Scotland, especially in the west of Scotland, there were so many restrictions on how you felt you could be and behave, be yourself, that people who are gay now and out and proud wouldn't have recognised Scotland 20 years ago. Interesting
point made by, with the greatest respect, Craig Brown, who was probably the older contributor in that piece, talking about the old industries, just a period. That was his perspective on it. Has that registered with either of you?
Yes, I suppose it's quite obvious that the heavy industries are not what they were. They're just a shadow of themselves.
Had that decline already started over 20 years ago?
It had.
Well done as well.
And also we've had long enough to have, governments have had long enough on either side of the border to have replaced or invested properly in newer industries. And I think that Britain, and to a lesser extent Scotland, has been left further behind than other countries who predicted, made plans and trained their workforce differently, trained their workforces differently in order to meet the new technological challenge better than we have.
But I think that in terms of the industrial change, I think actually 10 years before, and the miners' strike and so on, was when we were seeing the big ructions. I think over the last 20 years it's been the ripples in that pond that we've been seeing. But obviously that's still happening. I mean, what's been happening this year with the steel industry, you know, that is still ongoing. It's not gone altogether. But I think the process of deindustrialisation was well underway before the last 20 years.
And Kevin touched on it slightly there. Maybe people doing more jobs now, and it's not you had the one job that's you
Oh,
didn't
definitely. And I mean, Kevin and I are both in the cusp of that very syndrome. You know, when Kevin and I used to work together, in fact, within the span of this, with this poll, and if someone had said to us then that our industry was going to be on its knees within the next 20 years, we would have laughed at them. You know, we thought we ruled the world and we worked for the best paper in the world, in the best country in the world, in the country that read the most newspapers. And we were probably very complacent and unpleasant about it. But we're not the only industry that's happened to. And so there's lots of people our age, you know, living with redundancies, living with retraining, not knowing what on earth how the last bit of their life is going to pan out. And I think for our children, they will just expect to have these, what do they call them, portfolio CVs or portmanteau careers or whatever the term is for them, in a way that we just weren't geared up for at all.
I think, again, I don't want to just go on about the downside, but 20 years ago we hadn't heard of food banks in a country that still regards itself as one of the most affluent in the world.
It is one of the most affluent, and there's no regard about it. It is.
We've now got dozens of them. We had none then, and we've got in-work poverty. Wages have not kept up with the rise in household goods and our way of life.
Very finally and very briefly from you both then, is Scotland a better place?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a better place. I mean, even in practical terms, things like the smoking ban, I would say that has inarguably made Scotland a nice place to live.
I'm not sure it's an entirely better place. But for people like us in our kind of media middle class bubble, perhaps, there are still an awful lot of people out there who do without.
Thank you both for joining us in Scotland tonight. Thank you.